Today I'm going to be sharing with you all the books that I read in the month of July. July was actually a really phenomenal reading month for me. Every single book that I read I really ended up liking, and I found a new favorite book of all time, although I have not yet finished it yet. So I'm going to be finishing it this month, but it'll be the first book in the month of August. But I just can't wait to share with you all the books that I read in July. And not only that, but I think what was really special about reading the books that I did, especially in the summer, was that I was traveling a lot in July. And so a lot of the books that I was reading, I'll always remember reading on the specific trips, and I'll have all these associations with them. So I just feel like they hold special meaning to me, and I'm just really excited to share with you all of these incredible books. The first book that I finished in the month of July was an audiobook, and it's called Chatter: The Voice in Our Head, Why It Matters, and How to Harness It by Kross. So Kross is a psychologist, and as you can tell from the title of this book, this is kind of just about the inner dialogue that you have in your head and all the thoughts that you're thinking to yourself. You could say that this is kind of like low-grade anxiety, or just how our inner dialogue affects the way that we live our life. So I actually really like this book. I know I've been reading a lot of psychology books, and psychology is usually kind of a hit or miss for me because sometimes I feel like psychology books can be a little heady, where they don't bring it down to the level for people like us, just normal people, to read, and it can get a little too sciencey. But I actually really liked how this book brought it down to a level where you can actually apply the techniques into your own life, and you can directly see how these case studies he was presenting to you could impact your own life, and you can create meaning from them instead of having these kind of far off examples that don't really mean anything to you. I do remember one technique that I actually really like, and I don't remember the exact name, but it's a way of speaking to yourself in a disassociation. When you're talking to yourself in third person, it's a way to kind of disassociate from the chatter in your brain, and it's actually more powerful to state your name to yourself. And I also think that it's a way to step back from a situation and to see yourself in a third-party perspective, because sometimes it's so easy to get bogged down in our own lives. But when we're able to take a step back and see ourselves like a separate entity, we're able to view situations differently. So I really liked that. Yeah, I really enjoyed Chatter as an audiobook. I highly recommend if you ever get anxious or you feel like you want to speak to yourself a little bit more kindly. I think this is a great book to read. So the next book that I finished in July was The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. If you don't know, I went to Arizona and Seattle on a trip, and I brought this book along with me because this book is set in Seattle, which is where I'm from, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to read a book in the actual place where it was happening. So this book was really fun because it's kind of like a lighthearted romance read, and so I ended up listening to it on audio while I was reading the book physically, which was kind of cool to have the voice actor and the words on the page kind of both coming to life for me. But if you don't know, this book is about Shay Goldstein, I already forgot her name, who works at a Seattle public radio station, and her coworker Dominic Yoon, who it's kind of like an enemies to lovers type of romance, although it's more of like this guy kind of annoys me to lovers. Like, I don't really think that they're actually enemies, but they work at this radio station, and their boss wants them to have this podcast where they basically pretend to be exes giving relationship advice. So it's either they do that or they risk unemployment. So they basically have to lie to their listeners, which they're obviously in the news business, they're in journalism, so lying is really hard for them to do. But they have this podcast where, as I said, they pretend to be exes, although they've never even dated before, and they give relationship advice, and then a romance ensues from there. I really like this book. I'm usually not a contemporary romance person, but I thought this book was really light and fun, and I thought the characters were fairly likable. I obviously liked that it was set in Seattle, and it was just about a woman she was in her late 20s, but navigating her early career and relationships, and also dealing with changes and grief. Like, for example, her dad had passed away, so she talks a lot about the grief that she has for her father, and also her mother as she was trying to heal from that time in their lives. And yeah, I thought this was a really fun book. It's a definite, like, vacation read, beach read, if you just want something really lighthearted, a great summer read. And I really enjoyed myself while I was reading it. The next book I finished was an audiobook, and it's called The Boys Club by Katz. Again, I really liked this book. I'd say this is kind of like contemporary with a hint of thriller, but not actually a thriller. And this is basically about Alex Vogel just graduated from Harvard Law School, and she accepts a job at a really prestigious firm in New York City. And basically it talks about her experience working at the law firm, and as you can see from the title, it's kind of a boys club. And so Alex has a loving relationship at home, and she promises her boyfriend that this law firm won't change her. But as she starts working for the firm more and more, she starts getting really caught up in the competitiveness. So she tries to get into the M&A practice group, which is one of the most prestigious practice groups. She's getting really into like whining and dining and all the glitz and glamour that comes with the money that you get while you're a new lawyer. And so she kind of gets wrapped up in this world, and then she starts uncovering things about this world that is not as great as it looks. So basically the reason why I kind of consider this as a thriller is because throughout the entire book you get these snippets of her on the stand testifying in front of a court, and you don't know why she's actually testifying until later on in the book, but you kind of get these glimpses and you're like, what actually led for her to have to go and do this? And then you obviously finally find out towards the end. I wouldn't say it was like a huge, like big revelation, kind of like a thriller, but you're like, oh, okay, like that's what was actually happening throughout the book. I really like this book. I don't know why, but I just thought it was written really well. I guess my only critique would be I thought it was a little bit too long. And I think that it was, I mean, if you're a lawyer, you're gonna absolutely love this book and relate to it a lot. But I feel like it was almost like too much about her work life. And I wish that it balanced out a little bit more with her personal life. I know that the author talked a lot about her life with her boyfriend, but even just like talking about her friends, like I don't even think it was like a friend outside of the law firm that she had, or more about her parents and just like relationships and life outside of the law firm. I think it was like a lot on make sure to get these notes done and answer these emails and like what being a lawyer is actually like, and which is fine. I just think that maybe it could have been expanded a little bit. But I really liked it. I was like very intrigued with the book the whole time. As I said, I thought it was written pretty well. I thought it was interesting to hear about what it's like to be a new lawyer. I've also actually worked at a like prestigious law firm in New York City before, so I mean I have an idea of it like from the support staff side. I obviously am not an attorney, but it was really cool to learn more about it, and then also just a lot about the injustices that are happening in these corporate companies, especially with regards to women and what women have to face and how they have to kind of like be one of the guys. And the book talks a lot about that as well, which I find to be really interesting and also an important subject to bring up. But yeah, I really ended up liking this book. It was a really great audiobook, and it was definitely another kind of like fun read to read on vacation. Obviously like trigger warnings for like sexual assault and things like that. It does get into it a little bit, so I just wanted to bring that up, but I did really end up enjoying this book. So the last book that I finished is a book that I am really passionate about, because if you know me, you know that I love reading books that are about dating and relationships. So I read How to Not Die Alone, The Surprising Science That Will Help You Find Love by Logan Ury, and I really, really love this book. So I'm actually in a relationship, I'm not even single. I definitely think this book is more geared to single people. I would have absolutely loved this book if I was single, and I even loved it being in a relationship. So I've read so many dating and relationship books, and I think this book does such a good job of taking bits of information from a bunch of different famous relationship coaches and psychologists and kind of condenses it into a really nice, succinct book. So for example, some of the books that I've read books on attachment theory. She has a whole chapter on that. So instead of reading an entire book about attachment theory, you get like kind of a glimpse of it, and then you can figure out what attachment style you are in your own life. She also talks about, there was a book I read a while ago, it's called The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. She talks about being a maximizer or a satisficer in relationships, which is also a very interesting point. And again, instead of reading an entire book about it, you get just like a short chapter about it, which I think is just phenomenal. So I love this book. The author, Logan Ury, is a behavioral scientist and also a dating coach, and I just think that's such a fascinating type of career path to go on, and I wanted to share with you some of the things that this book goes over. So some of the things that she covers is what's holding you back in dating and what's actually important in a long-term partnership, navigating online dating, but also figuring out how to meet people in real life. And she also talks about how to make dating more fun and also the myth of the spark. So as you can tell from kind of the content, so she talks a lot about like the actual dating process and finding a mate, but then also in like the later part of the book, she talks about what makes for a great long-term partner. How do you know if you should marry someone? How do you know if you should move in with someone? And so she kind of brings you through the dating process, but then if you are in a relationship or if you're single and want to know what kind of happens towards the later half of the relationship, she also goes over that too, because I think sometimes dating books can just stop at the point where you meet your partner and then it's like you're trying to figure it out from there. But she kind of brings you from like setting up your dating profile on a dating app all the way through, should I marry this person and how do I make sure that I have long-term happiness and success with this partner. And if you can't tell, I really love this book. If you're single and you're struggling with dating, which is something that is not to be ashamed of, a lot of people do struggle with that. I highly recommend this book. I think that it's just like really encouraging that there's people out there who are writing books like this for single people. Again, if you're in a relationship like I am, I found it helpful too. I'm actually gonna have my boyfriend read it because we just love reading dating and relationship books together. But yeah, I love this book. I would read it again because I just find it really interesting and a lot of the things you can also use in a relationship. So those were the 4 books that I finished in July. I'm excited for the month of August just because I feel like I've really been picking up books that I've really been liking, which is really encouraging because I feel like sometimes I'm kind of off at like picking books, but those 4 books I really like. The books that I'm reading now I'm really liking, and I'm excited to do my August wrap up for you. This is probably one of the last videos I'll be shooting in my current room, which I don't have much of an attachment to because I've only been here for like 3 or 4 months. But yeah, that will be the end of my July wrap up. Let me know if you've heard of any of those books. If you're an avid booktube watcher, you've probably heard of the X Talk because that was definitely circulating, but the other books are not like uncommon. They're fairly like bestseller type of books, but let me know what you're going to be reading in the month of August. But thank you so much for getting all the way until the end of this video. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Missing someone